Okay, the time has finally come to get our web application live on the web. Are you ready for this? This is going to be a big day. So we're going to do this with a service that I've mentioned before called Heroku. And if you search for Heroku Rails 5, you'll see a list of instructions for getting started with Rails 5 on Heroku. But I'm going to walk you through this right now. There's a few settings here that they mention, and it can be a little confusing for a beginner. But the first thing you do have to do is basically go to Heroku.com and create an account. So sign up, it's free, and you can do it immediately. So do that now. And once you've gone and created an account, you need to download and install the Heroku tool belt, which is this tool right here. There's also a link to that below. And once you've downloaded and installed that, it should set up something called the command line client, which allows you to run Heroku commands from your command line. And these Heroku commands will let us create a new application, will let us interact with our application once it's actually live. Now, if you're on a Windows and you're using Git Bash, you won't be able to run Heroku commands in Git Bash. There's a bug right now, I believe, in the Heroku tools. So you're going to have to do, the first thing you have to do is Heroku login. And I believe you'll have to open up the command prompt on Windows to log in. And then the rest of them should be fine, but just know that. So pause the video now, go create a Heroku account and install the command line tools. And you'll know that you've set it up properly if you go into your folder, desktop, OM Rails. If you run Heroku, in my case, it's loading a bunch of applications, but if it says anything, then it means you have Heroku set up. If not, it means that you still need to go back and install the command line tools. So go ahead and do that and then run Heroku login in order to log in. So we got to do a few things now in order to get our app ready to push to Heroku. The first thing we have to do is basically set up our database on Heroku. So the problem with our application right now, I'm going to open it up here in Sublime Text. The problem with our application is that it's using a database called SQLite, specifically SQLite 3. Now this is it's a good database that Rails comes with by default, but it's not really something that you want to be using on the web. It's more of like a testing database. So Heroku specifically needs you to use something called PG, or Postgres. And they recommend actually removing SQLite 3 entirely and installing Postgres on your computer, which you can do, but it's a little bit of a headache to install Postgres on your computer. And an easier technique is to do this. It's to actually take this gem out of here and to move it into this group of development and testing. So you can actually paste that in below. So this basically is telling Rails you want to use this on your computer and in testing, which we're not going to do. And then you can create another group. We can just do it right here below these two groups for production. So group :production space do. Make sure it's exactly this way. And then gem, and then with these single quotes, PG. And then the next line, do end, and it should automatically indent that back in. So this looks a lot like the other groups on this page. Remember the do at the end, it's easy to forget that. And you also need this end here. So this basically says we're going to use this one database on Heroku, and Heroku will install these automatically for you, but because they're in production, they won't get installed on your computer. However, you will need to actually run bundle install right here. Even though it shouldn't actually install this on your computer because it's in production, it will update your gemfile.lock, which is what bundler does. It looks like it is installing it here for me. Oh, I think I actually have to do bundle install skip production. If you do run into a problem with this, do bundle install without production. Okay, so in case you do run into a problem with the PG gem. So that's the first step that we have to follow to getting the database part set up. The second thing is basically at the top of your gem file, Heroku is going to need you to specify what version of Ruby you're using. So in our case, I'm using Ruby 2.3.0. Remember, you can do Ruby V to check the version. And you can add that into the top here with Ruby space 2.3.0. And then save that. If you're using 2.3.1, that's fine. Anything more than 2.2 is totally acceptable. And I believe this is all the changes that we have to make in order to get this ready to go to Heroku. So now what I can do is I can save the changes. Git add -a, git commit m, getting ready to deploy to Heroku. And if you've done Heroku login, then what you should be able to do is Heroku create, and then you name your app. So let's call this, let's see if OM Rails is actually taken or not. Heroku create OM Rails. If you don't pass in the name of an application, it'll actually create one for you by default. Okay, OM Rails is taken. So let's call it Heroku create OM Rails, and I'll call it OM Rails. I'll do hyphen OM Rails. Okay, so it's actually created an app, and it gives us the URL for the app. It'll be here. So it's basically https om-rails.herokuapp.com, but there's nothing there yet. It just says welcome to your new app. If you only did Heroku create, it'll create a random name for you. But now that this is created, basically what I can do is I can do automatically, by the way, when you create an app, it should add a remote for you. And I can run git remote space -v to see the remotes that are set up. So now I have the origin still, which is GitHub, but I also have this Heroku remote. So that means if I run git push Heroku master, this will push my master branch, the main branch that I'm on in Git, to Heroku. And we should see our changes on Heroku. This will take a little bit. You see it actually says it's detecting a Ruby app. It's installing all the gems now. If you scroll up, it'll say it recognized the version of Ruby. It's running bundle install basically. It's installing all the gems here that we specified. It's going to install PG and everything else. This is exciting. I can't wait to see if this works. Bundle install complete. Running Rails assets compile. So this is the asset pipeline. And the way that Rails works is all of these things inside of app assets will get compiled into like one file to make it really fast and really easy to run on the web. And basically, looks like that's everything. Verifying deploy done. We're good. Now, if you ran into an error, it may be that you didn't follow the instructions that I gave you exactly. It could be that there's another problem. We'll do some troubleshooting. Of course, there's a lot of problems that can happen. But I can run Heroku open, or I can just go back here to the URL that we got, or the URL that you're seeing here. All three of them will do the same thing. And there's my website. Oh my God, it's live on the web. So everything that I have here before worked. The about page, the home page, it's actually up here at https://om Rails, which is the name that I gave. I can now go and send this to someone, and they'll actually be able to access it and interact with it. Not only that, if I wanted to, it's actually very easy to create my own custom URL. So I can now buy a domain, point it here, and then my domain could be at whatever you want it to be, .com. And you can point that to your Heroku URL. And I'll actually do a bonus video on how you can set up a custom domain if that's something you're interested in doing. So you can imagine if you wanted to build websites for people and charge them a little bit of money to do it, we now know exactly what we need to be able to do that. Congratulations. If you followed all the steps, you've just deployed your first web application to the internet.